All right, now for more on Facebook's China ambitions and Baidu's social ambitions, let's bring in David Chao. He's a co-founder and general partner of DCM. It's a technology consultancy specializing in Asia. David's also on the board of Legend Capital in China and comes to us from Stanford University. David, let's get right into it. What's the most likely way Facebook's going to get into China?
I think the most likely way, Cory, is for them to most likely work with a local Chinese partner, most likely a large portal company or a search engine company that has the traffic and the brand name already, that could work with them and to release a social networking site. Although, as you know, there are a lot of obstacles in terms of content censorship, as well as, certainly right now, Facebook has a reputation of helping different kinds of social unrest in the Middle East, and I think that doesn't really bode well in the eyes of the Chinese government.
David, you guys have investments across China. What kind of knowledge do you have of any talks that might have been going on between Facebook and Baidu?
I think there's definitely been discussions. There's no question about that. I think there's been rumors, mills going on left and right. There are three possibilities that can happen. The first is to have a China-specific brand new social networking site that the two parties create together. The second option is to potentially have a site that links with some of the Facebook content and certainly the ecosystem of game developers built on their API, for example. But that would probably come with some kind of a meaningful censorship, and which would not be an easy task. The third possibility, of course, is to kind of launch an SNS site with full links to Facebook, although I think that possibility is not a realistic one. So it's either option one or option two, and each has its pros and cons, and I think that's some of the discussion that's going on.
David, let me ask you, I mean, I know that or I've read at least, that censorship in China is maybe over-imagined by those of us not in China, but it seems the very nature of Facebook runs exactly counter to the way that Chinese censors have controlled the internet there, and that there's really no possibility of a Facebook as we know it existing in a place like China.
Well, I think the reality is there are SNS sites in China, like QQ, which is not real identity, and then there's RenRen.
I'm sorry,
that
David,
is real identity.
what's SNS? SNS?
I apologize. Social networking sites like Facebook, MySpace, etc. And so in China, there are already incumbents that exist. QQ Tencent started off as an IM company. Now with games, they have a non-real name identity-based SNS with probably 300 million plus users. RenRen has a real identity SNS site, often called the Facebook of China, with over 170 million people plus. And those numbers are at least probably around twice the number of U.S. Facebook users. So, there are incumbents already in place. And obviously, the government works with these various sites to make sure certain topics are not covered. But, as we know, there are, billions of different topics that people talk about. Obviously, the ones, the topics that the government is sensitive about is, usually a small fraction. And therefore, the fundamental value proposition of a social networking site still very much can exist in China.
But David, is Facebook prepared to make the kind of ethical compromises that it would require with Chinese censors in order to keep a site operating like this? I mean, Facebook's been blocked for almost 2 years, and there's no sign of it ever coming back. If anything, the censors have gotten more strict over the last few months.
Yeah, Emily, that's a great question. I would say that that is exactly the reason why Facebook is looking for a partnership in China, because I think as a solo play, it's very difficult to go in. Also, China has always proven itself that it has a indigenous leader in almost every field of the internet industry. So you look at, Sina is equivalent of Yahoo. Baidu is the equivalent of Google, but they're both number ones. Ctrip versus Travelocity, 51Job versus Monster.com. And so I think, Facebook understands that. So they want to work with a local partner. And, it's kind of a win-win because on the one hand, I don't think, it would be viewed if the partnership or the joint venture ends up being, even though they might censor some things, it's, quote unquote, not really Facebook doing it. And, I think it's kind of cake and eat it too scenario that they can have a foothold in China, but yet not be criticized about the about the
David,
censorship.
thank you very much. We got to jump. We're really glad you can join us. David Chao of DCM joining us from Stanford.